Now the last topic I will be covering in this section is estimations in an agile environment. And the only estimation we have is determining the velocity of your agile team. Velocity is an extremely simple, powerful method for accurately measuring the rate at which your agile development team is consistently delivering business value to the customer. So what's the rate at which your team is delivering value? This is the velocity. To calculate velocity of your team, simply add up the estimates of the features, user stories, requirements, or backlog items successfully delivered in an iteration. This is how you should determine the velocity. Simply add up the estimates of all the features delivered in a specific iteration. There are some simple guidelines for estimating initial velocity of your agile team prior to completing the first iteration, but after that point you should use proven historical measures for planning features. The aim of this paragraph is that we can use simple guidelines for estimating the initial velocity for your team for the first 2 or 3 iterations. After that, we need to build a solid estimate based on the completed iterations of the project. Within a short time, velocity typically stabilizes and provides a tremendous basis for improving the accuracy and reliability of both near-term and longer-term planning of your agile projects. Agile delivery cycles are very small, so velocity quickly emerges and can be validated very early in a project and then relied upon to improve project predictability. So as the project progresses, as more iterations are being executed, the velocity measure will be more solid. Velocity is the sum of the estimates of delivered, accepted features per iteration, and usually it's measured with the same units of the feature estimates, which is the story points. Sometimes it can be measured using days, ideal days, or hours, but the most common unit is the story points. So the velocity unit will be story points per iteration or per sprint. Now, how to measure velocity in agile projects? Your team planned to tackle 41 story points in the first iteration. They completed 28 story points and rolled 13 story points over to the next iteration. So their velocity will be 28 story points. That's it. This is how we calculate the velocity. It's the number of story points completed in a single iteration. For our example, the team selected 6 user stories for the first iteration with a total of 41 story points. The actual is that they completed only 4 user stories and 2 were rolled over to another iteration or back to the product backlog. Note that we are not counting any partially completed work towards the team velocity. Only the tasks marked as done count. Even if there is only a tiny bit of work left to do in the task, we only count for the tasks that are marked as done. Okay? So far, we know that the team fell short of their target for how much work to complete in the iteration, but we are not really sure how far short they fall, so we only count for the completed user stories. Over one iteration, velocity is not a very useful metric for making predictions, but it does give the team a sense of how much work they can commit in a single iteration. So for example, let's track the progress of our team for 4 iterations. At the first iteration, the team's velocity was 28 story points. During the second iteration, it was 36 story points. For the third one, it was 28 story points, and for the fourth, it was 30 story points. So starting from iteration number 5, we can rely on the average velocity of the first 4 iterations. It will be 31 story points per iteration. So you can make predictions. You can expect when the project will be completed. The average over just 4 iterations is already much more useful than the snapshot we had after just 1 iteration. It's easy to imagine how, with a backlog of already estimated user stories, we could use this velocity to make predictions. We could predict how quickly the team could get through all of the work, and we could make educated guesses about what features we would be able to deliver in upcoming releases. Velocity works best with long-lasting, stable teams which have lots of experience of working and estimating together. An example of the velocity estimations: checking your product backlog. There are 200 story points to complete the project. Given that the average velocity of the team is 20 story points per iteration and that each iteration is time boxed into 2 weeks, what's the remaining project duration in weeks? This is how the questions will look like in the exam. We have 200 story points remaining in the product backlog. The team's average velocity is 20 story points per iteration. How many more weeks the team needs to finish the project? Dividing the remaining story points by the velocity, we will have remaining 10 iterations. It's given that the iteration duration is 2 weeks, so 10 by 2 weeks will give you 20 weeks. So the team will need another 20 weeks to finish the project. Another example: a project has a total of 550 story points and each project sprint has a fixed duration of 4 weeks. At the end of the 4th sprint, the team had successfully delivered 76 story points. The team was able to successfully address some improvement opportunities, and accordingly, during the 5th sprint, the team was able to deliver an additional 24 story points. If the team maintains its current velocity, how many more sprints are required to complete the project? The sprint is a similar term to the iteration. However, the sprint is being used in the Scrum framework. Now, back to our question. Up to the 5th sprint, the team delivered 76 story points plus 24 story points in the 5th iteration. So total, the team delivered 100 story points in 5 iterations or 5 sprints. So the first step is to find out the team's velocity, which will be 76 plus 24 divided by 5 sprints. So the team's average velocity is 20 story points per sprint. The total product backlog story points is 550. However, the team already completed 100 story points up to the 5th sprint. So the remaining story points in the product backlog will be 550 minus 100. It's 450 remaining in the product backlog, dividing 450 by the velocity of the team, 20 story points. You will have 22.5 sprints. So the team will require an additional 23 sprints to complete the project.